The morning after my sister splashed permanent hair dye across my only interview blazer, I walked into my medical school interview wearing the stain, and the dean stared at my name tag like he had just seen a ghost. My name is Claire Waverly. I was 27 years old, standing in the guest bathroom of my parents' house at 4:36 in the morning, holding a charcoal blazer that looked like someone had bled ink down the front of it. The stain ran from the left lapel to the bottom button in jagged purple-black streaks. It smelled chemical, sweet, and vicious. 6 hours earlier, that blazer had been the only professional jacket I owned. It had been a gift from a mother I was not related to by blood, a woman named Rosa Mercado, whose son I had sat beside through 2 years of pediatric cardiology appointments. Rosa had pressed it into my hands and said, "Wear this when you ask the world to let you help more children." Then my sister ruined it while smiling. It happened the night before my Stanford medical school interview. My younger sister, Tessa, stood in the laundry room doorway with a squeeze bottle of black box dye in her hand. She was 24, pretty in the way my parents had always treated as proof of destiny, and angry in the way people get when entitlement meets evidence. I had laid the blazer on the ironing board, turned toward the sink for water, and heard the first wet splash before I understood what I was hearing. When I spun around, the dye was already spreading into the wool. "Tessa," I whispered. She lifted the bottle again and squeezed harder. My mother, Celeste, called from the family room without looking away from her tablet. "Claire, stop making everything dramatic. It is clothing." My father, Warren added, "Your sister has had a difficult month. Do not provoke her before your little interview." Little interview. Stanford medicine. The dream I had worked toward for 12 years. I did not scream. That surprised me. For most of my life, I had imagined the final cruelty would make me explode. Instead, something inside me went quiet. Quiet can be more frightening than rage, because quiet means the last excuse has died. Tessa set the empty dye bottle on the counter like a signature. "Maybe now they will see what you really are," she said. I looked at the stain, then at her, then at my parents, who were sitting 20 feet away acting as if sabotage were a sibling disagreement. I turned off the iron. I folded the blazer over my arm. I walked upstairs to my childhood bedroom and locked the door. That was the last night I slept under their roof. To understand why that blazer mattered, you need to understand the Waverlys. We lived in a white brick house in Palo Alto where every wall had framed photographs of accomplishments, but only the right accomplishments. My father was a senior partner at a venture capital firm. My mother chaired 2 hospital charity committees and spoke often about compassion at fundraising breakfasts. They believed medicine was noble as long as it made them look noble. They also believed I was not the daughter meant to wear the white coat. Tessa was, from the time I was 9. My mother described Tessa as naturally healing. Tessa fainted at the sight of blood, forgot to show up for volunteer shifts, and once called a stethoscope Dr. Jewelry, but she had a bright smile and a way of making donors laugh. That was enough for my mother. I was the serious one, useful, dependable. Too plain, too intense, too difficult to market. At 16, I told my parents I wanted to become a pediatric cardiologist. My father nodded slowly and said, "That path requires charm as well as grades." My mother smiled with pity. "You would be excellent behind the scenes, darling. Research, maybe." Tessa has the bedside warmth. Tessa was 13 and had just failed biology. By college, the family story was set. Tessa would be the doctor. I would be the hardworking older sister who helped everyone else succeed. My parents paid for Tessa's private tutors, MCAT coach, admissions consultant, summer enrichment programs, and glossy hospital shadowing opportunities arranged through board members. I attended UC Davis on scholarships and loans, worked nights at a pharmacy, and graduated with honors in human biology. When I got hired as a patient advocate at a children's hospital in Oakland, my mother asked if that was basically receptionist work. It was not. My job was to help families navigate care plans, insurance nightmares, language barriers, housing issues, transplant lists, and the impossible geography of fear. I sat with parents when surgeons used words too large for grief. I translated medical instructions into Spanish when interpreters were delayed. I learned which vending machine had the soup children could tolerate after procedures. I remembered birthdays on units where time blurred into labs and monitors. That was where I met Mateo. Mateo Mercado was 8 when he arrived with a failing heart and a backpack full of dinosaur stickers. He had cardiomyopathy, a mother who worked double shifts cleaning office buildings, and a laugh that made nurses pretend they had entered the room by accident just to hear it. His father had been deported 3 years earlier. Rosa Mercado was raising him alone, commuting 2 buses to appointments, sleeping in chairs, and smiling only when Mateo looked directly at her. The first time I met them, Rosa was crying in a stairwell because the transplant coordinator had explained ventricular assist devices too quickly and in English. Mateo thought the machine would turn him into a robot forever. I sat beside him, pulled a pen from my pocket, and drew a terrible robot with a heart sticker on its chest. "Temporary robot helper," I told him in Spanish. "Not forever." He studied the drawing. "Can the robot helper like pancakes? Only if the doctor approves syrup." He smiled. That smile became a doorway I walked through for the next 22 months. I helped Rosa apply for housing support. I sat with Mateo during echo appointments. I read him chapters from The Little Prince when he was too tired for screens. He called me Miss Claire with the clipboard, then just clipboard, like a superhero name no one asked for. Mateo loved sunrises because his hospital room faced east over the parking structure, and he insisted the sun looked bigger when seen through glass. One morning after a rough night, he whispered, "The light came back. That means I did too." I wrote that sentence down in a private draft of my medical school personal statement. Not because it sounded beautiful, though it did. Because it was the moment I understood what kind of doctor I wanted to be. Not the dramatic kind who storms in with miracles, but the steady kind who remembers that families need someone to help them survive the minutes between decisions. I saved the draft on a shared family cloud folder my mother had created years earlier for tax documents and college forms. That was my mistake. Mateo died 7 months before my interview. His donor heart never came. In his final week, he asked Rosa to write a letter to the people who decide doctors. Rosa wrote exactly what he dictated in pencil on hospital notepaper. "Please let Claire Waverly become a doctor." She explained my heart when I was scared. She told my mom the hard words in Spanish. She remembered the sun came back. She is already helping people breathe. Mateo Mercado, age 10. Rosa gave that letter to Dr. Anika Rao, Mateo's attending cardiologist, because Mateo told her to give it to someone important. Dr. Rao had trained years earlier with Dr. Malcolm Say, who was now on Stanford Medicine's admissions leadership. She sent him the letter with one note: "For the applicant when she comes." I did not know any of that. I also did not know my mother had opened my draft at 1:52 in the morning, 3 weeks before Tessa submitted her own application. Tessa applied the year before I did. My parents announced it like a family coronation. There were private consultants, mock interviews, a photographer for application headshots, and speeches at dinner about legacy. My mother told guests Tessa had deep clinical intuition from years spent with vulnerable children. The truth was uglier. Tessa had visited my hospital exactly 5 times across 3 years, total time, 6 hours and 9 minutes. Never on Mateo's floor during his admission, never in his room. Never once speaking to Rosa. I had logged over 2,800 patient advocacy hours, 940 of them connected to Mateo's case and similar cardiology families. My supervisor, Dennis Park, had the records. The hospital had badge logs. Nurses had notes. Paper had been quietly telling the truth long before anyone asked it to speak. Tessa got into Stanford. I cried in my car for 10 minutes, then went back to work. A year later, I applied. I submitted my real essay, rewritten from the old draft, including Mateo's sunrise sentence, because I refused to remove the truth from my own life just because my family had spent years trying to shrink it. The interview invitation came in January. My interview was scheduled for Monday, March 9th. My mother called the Friday before. "Come home Sunday night," she said. "Your father wants a family dinner. We should celebrate your attempt." Attempt. I should have said no. I had not been home in 9 months, but some wounded part of me still wanted parents before a life-changing morning. That is the humiliating truth about neglected daughters. We can build entire lives and still answer one call, hoping this time the table will be warm. So I drove to Palo Alto with Rose's blazer hanging in the back seat. Dinner was a museum of old patterns. My mother asked Tessa about medical school anatomy lab. My father asked her whether Stanford faculty had noticed her natural leadership. When I mentioned my interview schedule, my mother said, "Do not over-prepare." Admissions can smell desperation. Tessa watched me across the table with a strange tightness in her mouth. After dessert, I took the blazer to the laundry room to steam it. I wanted it perfect. Rosa had given it to me after Mateo's funeral, saying it had belonged to her sister, who once dreamed of nursing school but never got the chance. "It has courage in it," she said. I laid it flat. The family room television murmured behind me. My parents were on the couch. Tessa wandered in wearing silk pajamas and holding the dye bottles she said she was using on a costume whizzing for some school event. I turned to fill the steamer. Splash. The dye hit wool like a verdict. When I turned, Tessa was smiling. Not a crazy smile, not a tantrum, a calm one. That was worse. She knew exactly what she was doing. "Tessa," I said again, because sometimes the brain repeats a name when it cannot accept the action attached to it. She squeezed the bottle a second time, slowly, down the front seam. My mother sighed from the couch. "Claire, lower your voice." I didn't raise my voice. "You are raising the energy," my father said. "Your sister is under pressure. Stanford is intense. If she snapped, maybe ask what you did." There it was, the family constitution in one sentence. If Tessa harmed me, I must have caused the weather. I looked down at the blazer and realized something that steadied me. Tessa had not destroyed it because she thought I would fail. She destroyed it because she thought I might not. That changed everything. I carried the blazer upstairs. I did not rinse it. I did not beg my mother for help. I did not call Rosa, because I could not bear to tell her yet. I hung it over the closet door and sat on the floor until dawn. At 5:10 a.m., I put it on. The stain had dried into dark streams against charcoal wool, ugly and undeniable. I buttoned it once. I looked like someone who had walked through sabotage and refused to change clothes. Maybe that was exactly what I needed to look like. The drive to Stanford took 40 minutes. The sky over the hills turned pale gold, and I let myself cry for exactly one red light. Then I dried my face and kept going. At the admissions office, there were 7 other applicants in careful suits. Their jackets were clean. Their shoes were polished. No one said anything about mine, but several eyes flickered down and away. The assistant checked my name. "Claire Waverly, you have 3 interviews today. Dr. Leona Kim at 9, Dr. Malcolm Say at 10:15, and Dr. Priya Desai at 1. She paused. "Dr. Say requested your file personally." I thanked her. My hands were cold. Dr. Kim interviewed me first and asked about patient advocacy. When I described bilingual family support in pediatric cardiology, she leaned forward. "You have far more direct patient contact than typical applicants." I nodded. I know what families look like before the doctor enters and after the doctor leaves. I think that matters. She wrote that down. At 10:15, I knocked on Dr. Say's door. His office had tall windows, a shelf of old medical textbooks, and a framed photograph of a children's ward from the 1990s. He was in his early 60s, calm, gray-haired, with eyes that looked tired from caring carefully for too long. He shook my hand, then glanced at the stain on my blazer. He did not pretend not to see it. "Miss Waverly," he said, "before we begin, are you safe?" The question nearly undid me. "Yes," I said. "Today, yes." He nodded once. "Then tell me about the patient who taught you why you belong in medicine." I had prepared an answer about systems navigation. Instead, I told him about Mateo. I told him about the robot helper drawing, Rosa's 2-bus commute, the little prince, the east-facing window, and the morning Mateo whispered that the light came back. Dr. Say went very still. When I finished, he opened his desk drawer and took out a cream folder. From inside it, he removed a folded page. "I need to confirm something," he said. "Mateo Mercado, pediatric cardiomyopathy. Mother Rosa, room facing east. You are that Claire?" My throat closed. "Yes." He looked at my stained blazer, then at my last name on the file. His expression changed completely. "Wait," he said softly. "You're her?" He turned the page toward me. I recognized Rosa's handwriting immediately. "Please let Claire Waverly become a doctor." I read the rest through blurred eyes. Dr. Sai said, "Dr. Anika Rao sent this to me last year. She told me to keep it until you applied. I did not know when that would be. I did know something else. A student already enrolled here used details from this child's story in her admissions essay. Same room, same sunrise, same phrase. Her last name was also Waverly. The room tilted Tessa. She wrote about Mateo? She wrote about a child she claimed to have supported closely during a cardiology admission. When your application arrived, the overlap was impossible to ignore. I could hear my pulse in my ears. Dr. Say folded his hands. I am going to ask you to complete your interviews today. Afterward, I will explain the formal process. This is not gossip. This is academic integrity. Academic integrity sounded almost too small for what had happened. My sister had not stolen a phrase. She had stolen a dying child's trust. I finished the day. I do not remember much of the last interview, except that Dr. Desai asked why medicine, and I answered, because families deserve someone who does not look away when the hard part starts. On the drive home, I did not go to Palo Alto. I drove to my apartment in Oakland. I called Dennis Park, my supervisor, and asked him to pull every advocacy log connected to Mateo Mercado. He did not ask why until after he agreed. Then I called Rosa. When she answered, I heard dishes clinking and a Spanish radio station in the background. Rosas? I said. Did Mateo write a letter for me? She went silent. Cease, she whispered. Dr. Rao sent it. I thought you knew. I told her what happened. I told her about Tessa's essay. I told her about Dr. Sai. She listened without interrupting. At the end, she said, Mija, Mateo wanted them to see you, not someone wearing your story. I covered my face and cried for the first time that day. The formal process began the next week. Stanford's professionalism committee requested documentation from me, Dr. Sai, Dr. Rao, hospital badge security, and the patient advocacy office. Dennis sent my logs, 2,842 total advocacy hours, 940 hours specifically connected to Mateo and adjacent cardiology coordination. He also sent case conference notes, after-hours family support entries, and nurse comments documenting my presence. Badge security sent Tessa's records. 5 visits, 6 hours and 9 minutes, none on Mateo's unit during his admission, none connected to Rosa, none connected to Dr. Rao's service. Dr. Rao confirmed Mateo's letter and chain of custody. Rosa agreed to testify by video if needed. Then came the part I feared, my family. I opened the shared family cloud folder and checked the version history of my original draft. There it was, April 22nd, 2:03 a.m., accessed by Celeste Waverly. No edits, just viewed. My mother had read my draft. 12 days later, Tessa submitted her secondary essay to Stanford. I called my father and asked one question. Did Mom give Tessa my essay? The pause lasted too long. Claire, he said. This is not a phone conversation. It is now, he exhaled. Your mother believed Tessa needed stronger material. I told her it was dangerous. She said you were waiting another cycle and could write something else. Something else. As if Mateo were a spare paragraph. As if Rosa's grief were a writing prompt. I asked him to send every message. He refused at first. Then, 3 days later, he called from his office parking garage. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. I found the thread, he said. I should have stopped it. He sent screenshots. My mother's messages were clear. Claire's Mateo section is stronger than anything Tessa has. Use the emotional structure, not exact words. Tessa needs Stanford more. Claire can always apply somewhere practical. Do not tell Claire. She gets moral about everything. My father had replied once. This could ruin both girls. My mother wrote back. Only if Claire makes a scene. Only if I made a scene. My ruined blazer suddenly felt less like an attack and more like a confession. The hearing was scheduled for April 14th. The night before, Tessa called me from an unknown number. Claire, she sobbed, please, I will lose everything. I sat at my kitchen table with the stained blazer hanging on the chair beside me. You used a child you never met. Mom said you were not applying that year. She said you would write something else. Tessa, Mateo died. I know. No. You knew his story died well enough to help you sound compassionate. You did not know him. She cried harder. Once, that would have pulled me into apology. I would have softened the truth because her feelings were always treated as the emergency. But I had learned something in hospitals. Pain is real, and still not all pain is innocent. I am not withdrawing, I said. You are destroying me. No, I am returning your work to you. I hung up. My mother left a voicemail 10 minutes later. If you go through with this, you are proving everything I ever said about you. Cold, jealous, punishing. Tessa is fragile. You have always been strong enough to survive. Why can't you let her have this? I saved it, not because I needed it for the hearing, because one day, if doubt returned, I wanted to remember how clearly she had said the quiet part aloud. Strong enough to survive had become their excuse to hurt me. At 5 cool the next morning, I put on the stained blazer. Rosa had told me to wear it. Let them see what they did, she said, and let them see it did not stop you. So I wore it. The stain crossed my chest like evidence. The committee room had 8 chairs, 1 camera, 3 faculty members, 1 student professionalism representative, Tessa with an advisor, and me. Dr. Say chaired the hearing. Dr. Kim sat to his left, Dr. Desai to his right. My parents were not allowed inside unless called as witnesses. They waited in the hallway, which felt almost poetic. For once, they were outside a room where my future was being discussed. Dr. Sai opened with the allegation. Academic misrepresentation in admissions materials, unauthorized use of another applicant's writing, and false representation of clinical experience involving a deceased pediatric patient. Then he turned to me. Miss Waverly, you may begin. I started with the numbers. Numbers are clean. They do not tremble. I submitted my advocacy logs. I submitted Tessa's badge records. I submitted my draft version history. I submitted the screenshot thread from my father. Then Dr. Say read Mateo's letter aloud. Please let Claire Waverly become a doctor. The room changed. Rosa appeared by secure video. She wore a white blouse, her hair pulled back, Mateo's dinosaur sticker still on the cabinet behind her. Dr. Saye asked her whether Mateo knew Tessa. No, Rosa said, never. Did Mateo know Claire? Rosa's mouth trembled. She was there when I could not understand. She was there when Mateo was afraid. She was there when he stopped asking if the heart was coming. No one moved. Then Rosa said, My son wrote that letter because he wanted Claire to be seen. Please do not let someone else stand in his light. Tessa began crying. This time, I believed some of it. Belief did not change the facts. Dr. Sai asked Tessa whether she had ever met Mateo Mercado. She whispered, no. That single word ended the performance. My mother was called as a witness. She entered wearing pearls, a navy dress, and a face arranged into wounded dignity. She looked at my blazer first, then away. Dr. Kim asked, Mrs. Waverly, did you access Claire Waverly's draft essay in April of last year? My mother smiled tightly. It was a family folder. That was not the question. Yes. Did you share material from that draft with Tessa Waverly? I guided my daughter. Which daughter? The question hung in the air like a scalpel. My mother blinked. Tessa was applying that cycle. Dr. Desai asked, Did you tell Claire? No. Claire becomes emotional. I almost laughed. Emotional. Another word they used when they meant inconveniently aware. Then Dr. Say asked the question that finally broke her composure. Mrs. Waverly, did you understand that the patient described in the essay was a real deceased child whose family had entrusted Claire with those experiences? My mother's jaw tightened. Applicants use stories. That is how essays work. Rosa, still on the screen, closed her eyes. Dr. Say's voice turned cold. Not stories taken from patients they never met. My mother looked at me then, and for the first time I saw fear. Not fear for me. Fear that the room believed me. That was all she had ever feared. Not cruelty, but exposure. Tessa's advisor tried to argue immaturity, family pressure, maternal influence, stress. The committee listened politely. Then Dr. Kim asked Tessa, You have been enrolled for 8 months. During that time, did you ever correct the record? Tessa shook her head. Did you ever contact the Mercado family? No. Did you ever tell Stanford admissions that the patient in your essay was someone you had not met? No. Dr. Kim wrote one word on her pad. I never saw it, but I did not need to. When I was allowed a closing statement, I kept it short. I am not here because my sister stained my blazer. I am here because she and my mother tried to wear my patient's trust as a costume. Mateo was a child. Rosa is his mother. Their story is not family property. Medicine requires truth before it requires brilliance. I want that truth on the record. That was all. The decision came 9 days later. Tessa was dismissed from Stanford Medicine for material misrepresentation in admissions. The school reserved the right to notify relevant application services and affiliated institutions. My mother texted me one sentence. I hope your little victory keeps you warm. I screenshotted it and did not answer. An hour later, I received my acceptance email. Dear Miss Waverly, the committee is pleased to offer you admission to Stanford School of Medicine. I read it 3 times. Then I called Rosa. She answered on the first ring. Did they see you? She asked. Yes, good, she said. Mateo said they would. That broke me. Not the dismissal. Not my mother's text. That sentence. Mateo said they would. A week later, Rosa invited me to her apartment for dinner. She made chicken with lime, rice, and plantains. After we ate, she brought out a sewing kit and asked for the blazer. I cannot fix the stain, she said. I know. I do not want to. She turned the blazer inside out and stitched one small gold thread sun into the lining near the heart. Not visible from the outside. Not for admissions officers. Not for my parents. For me. Now, Rosa said, tying the thread. The light came back inside. I pressed the blazer to my chest and cried into wool and dye and gold thread. They stained the jacket. They could not stain the truth. When I moved to Stanford, the blazer hung beside my desk. I did not wear it to every class. I did not need to. But on my first day of anatomy, I touched the lining before I left the apartment. My father eventually separated from my mother. He did not become a hero. People love clean redemptions. But life is not a movie with enough time for every coward to become brave. He apologized. He sent the remaining messages. He said he had mistaken peace in the house for goodness. I told him peace built on my silence had never been peace for me. We speak now, carefully, slowly, like people learning a language after years of hearing only noise, Tessa wrote once. Her letter was 3 pages long. She said she was sorry, then spent 2 pages explaining pressure, expectations, and how hard it was to be the daughter everyone watched. I read it. I believed some of it. Then I put it away. Understanding a wound does not require handing the knife back. My mother never apologized. She sent articles about forgiveness, then Bible verses, then nothing. Silence from her felt less like loss and more like weather finally clearing. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Tessa had not ruined the blazer. Maybe I would have worn a clean jacket, told a clean story, and let Dr. Say quietly compare files behind closed doors. Maybe the truth still would have surfaced, but that stain forced the first honest question of the day. Are you safe? No one in my family had ever asked me that. A stranger did. That is why I kept the blazer. Not because of sabotage, because of the moment someone saw the damage and cared about the person inside it. So if you are listening right now, and someone in your family has trained you to call theft, help, cruelty, stress, sabotage, sibling conflict, or silence keeping peace, I need you to hear me. Keep records, save drafts, screenshot messages. Trust the people who treat your truth like evidence instead of drama. And if this story has stayed with you, take a moment to like this video and follow She Chose Herself. It helps this reach another person who may be one ruined blazer, one stolen paragraph, one hidden letter away from taking back what belongs to them. I did not become a doctor because my family believed in me. I became one because a child did. And children, unlike ambitious adults, often know exactly who showed up when it mattered. On the shelf in my apartment now, there is a framed copy of Mateo's letter and a photograph of Rosa pinning my white coat at orientation. Inside my closet hangs the stained blazer. The black dye never came out. The gold suns never will. People ask why I keep something so ugly. I tell them it is not ugly to me anymore. It is a map. It shows where they tried to ruin me, where the truth entered, and where the light came back. My mother called it just a jacket. My sister treated it like a weapon. The dean saw it as a question. Rosa turned it into a memorial. And I carry it as proof that what they damaged was never the same thing as what they could destroy. Before orientation, I returned to the hospital to see Dennis Park. He had printed my final recommendation letter and left it in a sealed envelope, even though I had already been accepted. He said, I wrote it before the hearing. I wanted a version of your record untouched by their crisis. That mattered. So much of my life had been explained through someone else's discomfort that a clean professional record felt like a window opened in a room that had been sealed for years. Kelsey, the charge nurse, who had watched me with Mateo, met me by the elevators and handed me a paper bag full of granola bars. Medical school students forget to eat, she said. Do not become one of those inspirational disasters. I laughed because nurses can deliver tenderness as an order and somehow make it work. Rosa walked me to Mateo's old unit one last time. His room had another child in it, another family, another fear. We did not go inside. We stood at the end of the hall and looked toward the east-facing windows. Rosa touched my sleeve and said, "He would like that somebody else gets the sun now." The first time I wore a white coat, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt responsible. The coat was not a trophy. It was a promise with pockets. A place to carry pens, notes, hand sanitizer, and the awareness that every patient story belongs first to the patient. At orientation, a classmate asked why my last name sounded familiar. I said, "Long admission story." She smiled and did not pry. I liked her immediately. Some people prove themselves safe by respecting a closed door. One faculty member pulled me aside after the professionalism lecture and said the committee had changed how it reviewed patient narratives and applications. All essays involving identifiable clinical relationships would now require stricter verification. I thought of Mateo. Even after death, he had protected future patients from becoming stolen material. My father came to campus in October, not for a ceremony, just for coffee. He looked at the stained blazer hanging by my desk and asked if I wanted him to pay for a new one. I told him I already owned what I needed. He said, "I keep thinking about the laundry room." I said, "I keep thinking about all the rooms before it." That was the first time he understood. The blazer was not the beginning. Tessa tried to reapply elsewhere the next year. I heard through my father, not from her. I did not interfere. I also did not help. Consequences are not revenge simply because they are uncomfortable. Rosa started a community health worker program at night. She sent me photos of her notebooks. The first page had Mateo's name written in the corner. Grief does not disappear. Sometimes it studies for a license. My mother eventually stopped texting. The quiet after her last message felt strange for 3 days, then peaceful. I had mistaken the absence of her approval for emptiness. But it was actually room. In anatomy lab, I learned that the heart is both muscle and symbol, both pump and metaphor. I thought about how many people in my life had discussed the heart beautifully while failing to use theirs responsibly. When I struggled in my first semester, I almost heard my mother saying Stanford was too much for me. Then I remembered Mateo's letter did not say I was perfect. It said I was already helping people breathe. That was enough to keep going. I began mentoring pre-med students from families that did not know how to support them. I told them practical things: keep copies, ask for fee waivers, document hours, find recommenders who see you clearly, and never let someone else hold the only version of your story. One student asked if I hated my sister. I said, "No, I hate what she chose. I do not need hate to keep the boundary." The student wrote that down as if it were a clinical pearl. During winter break, Rosa and I cooked together. She burned the rice and blamed Mateo because he used to distract her. We laughed until we cried. That kind of grief felt clean, not like the contaminated grief in my parents' house. I finally deleted the shared family cloud folder from my laptop. Before I did, I exported every document that belonged to me. Then I closed the access that had allowed my work to become someone else's ladder. The stained blazer became part of my private ritual before difficult exams. I would touch the inside gold sun and remind myself that the light came back once and could do it again. Years from now, maybe I will buy a new blazer for interviews, but I will never throw this one away. Some ruined things become sacred when they survive with you. My family thought the stain would make me look unworthy. Instead, it made the right person ask the right question at the exact right time. That is the part I keep returning to. Sabotage only works completely when it separates you from witnesses, records, and your own belief in what happened. My sister had counted on embarrassment to make me hide the stain, but embarrassment is a weak lock once truth finds the key. My parents had counted on old training, the reflex that made me soften every hard edge before anyone else cut themselves on it. But a hospital teaches you that softening the wrong truth can kill something important, and I was finally done making their lies comfortable. Every record I saved became a small light in a hallway they had kept dark for years. Every person who spoke for me reminded me that chosen witnesses can be stronger than inherited silence. Every time I wanted to apologize for being difficult, I pictured Mateo watching the sunrise and saying the light came back. I decided my life would not be another room where someone else got to steal the light. Medicine begins before the white coat, before the acceptance letter, before the anatomy lab, before the first exam. It begins the moment you understand that another person's story is not material for your ambition. It begins when you choose presence over performance, truth over polish, and responsibility over applause. That is why the stained blazer still matters. Not because it proves what they did, but because it proves what they failed to do. They failed to stop me. They failed to erase Mateo. They failed to turn Rose's trust into Tessa's costume. They failed to make my pain look like drama once the documents entered the room. And most of all, they failed to convince me that being loved required staying small. If anyone listening has been called dramatic for reacting to real harm, keep your proof close. Your truth does not become smaller because someone rolls their eyes. Your work does not become theirs because they have the louder family voice. Your future does not belong to the people who only supported the version of you they could use. Let the stain show if it has to. Sometimes the damage is what makes the right person look closer.